Whenever you see a number inside of the parentheses, this is your x value. That's your x. And what this is asking you in words for part A, and I'll just say it out loud, it's saying, what is y when x is 0? That's what it's asking you to do for part A. Look at the graph. Tell me the y value when x is 0. So what do you think that y value would be when x is 0? 3. So that's your answer to part A. Part B is asking you, what is the y value when x is -6? So when you look at the graph, what is the y value when x is -6? -3. Who agrees with that? That is -3. So let me go ahead and put a point. So this is my first point. And you can see that that is why my answer is 3. For my second point, that's right here. That's why my answer is -3. Go ahead and answer questions C and D on your own, and then we'll see if you have the right answer. So looking at your graph, answer question part C and D. Both of those just have one number for the answer. All right, what did you put for question C? So let me find where x is 6. So x is 6 right here at this point. And at that point, it's 0. And then lastly, what did you put for question D? 1. Who agrees that it's 1? I agree too. So right here, it's 1. All right, next 4 questions with the same graph. Go ahead and copy down the next 4, E, F, G, and H. All right, so for question E, it's asking you, when x is 3, is y positive or negative? That's all it's asking. It's not asking you what that number is. It's just saying when x is 3. So here, this is when x is 3. So x is 3. They didn't have a point, but it's about right here. And when x is 3, is that red point, is the y value positive or negative? Positive. So that's your answer. This is one of your homework questions. It's a different graph, same questions. All right, so I'm just showing you how to go through each one of these questions. This is positive. And then it's f of -4. So f of -4 would be about here. where I put that blue dot. Is the y value positive or negative where I put that blue dot? Negative. All right, your domain. So when I'm looking at my domain, I'm going from the far left to the far right. So far left, the graph goes from here to here. What are the x values where I put those two lines? -6 to 11. So that would be your domain. And they would have a bracket because they're included. But for your range, I'm going to draw my lines vertically. So I'm going to the very bottom of the graph to the very top of the graph. So when I zoom in here, my lowest y value is -3. So my range is going to start at -3, and it's going to go all the way up here to +4. So my range is -3 to 4. Any questions about those four? Pretty easy, right? Should be an easy question in the homework. All right, next four, copy them down. I, J, K, and L. Joshua, is this supposed to be more than one page, or is this it? It's just one page? Okay.
Is that the homework from today? Okay, I put mine in this.
Oh, okay. No, I'm grading them now. Thank you. All right, do we have them all copied down? You still writing? Anybody need more time to write? Okay. So this question is asking you, for what values does y equal 0? So for what values of x does y equal 0? That's the same thing. These two questions right here are asking you the exact same questions. I and k are the same. Because whenever y is equal to 0, that's an x-intercept. So my answer for part I is going to be the same for my answer for part K. So when I'm looking here at this line, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line. This is when y equals 0. And if you look, there are 3 places that the graph crosses through. The first one is at -3, +6, and +10. The only difference is how we answer it. So for part I, we would just list those numbers. We would say it's -3, +6, and +10. But for part K, we will write those as ordered pairs. All right, So for part J, it's saying for what values of x is y greater than 0. So in other words, this is saying, when is y positive? Because if it's greater than 0, that means it's positive. When is y positive? That's what it's asking you. So when I'm looking at it, it's positive twice. I'm going to go ahead and highlight. It's positive from here to here. That's positive. And it's also positive right here. So we have to write that as an interval. So it's positive between x is -3 and here. What does x equal right here? So from -3 to 6 is positive. So we're going to write that. It looks like an ordered pair, but it's not. I'm going to answer it down at the bottom because I need a little bit more space. So I'm going to do J. I'm going to write it down here. So the interval, this is x values. This is interval notation. So this is not an ordered pair. That's the interval where it's positive. So this means that it's positive. If you were to write it the old school way, you would write it like this. So the interval where y is positive is when x is greater than -3, but less than 6. And then it's also positive here between 10 and 11. So it's also positive between 10 and 11. So I'm just writing it both ways so you can see it. You don't have to write it both ways when you take your test. You got a quiz a week from today. I'm passing out the study guide tomorrow. But when you take your quiz, you don't have to write it in interval notation. I'm just showing you both. I mean, you have to write it in interval notation. You don't have to write it. This is called set builder notation. I'm just writing it both ways. The main thing is I don't want you to think this is an ordered pair. This is not x and y. This is x and x. This is an interval. All right, lastly, our y-intercept. There's only one y-intercept, and where is our y-intercept? You look at your graph, it crosses at 0,3. So I know that's a little messy. Sorry about that. But this is question J. All right, last 4 pieces for this graph. Go ahead and copy it down, MNOP. And then we'll be done with 2.2. We can start 2.3. And then we'll be done probably tomorrow with everything. Yay. Okay, question 44. Our next homework is due Friday. And this 2.2, which we're going to finish here in a second. Okay, so for the last one, this says, how often does the line y equals 1/2 intersect the graph? So I'm just gonna draw a line at y equals 1/2. So 1/2 would be here, halfway between 0 and 1. I'm just gonna try to draw a straight line. How many times did that red line cross through the graph? So that's your answer. So now let's do, what about if it's x equals 5? So a vertical line, though, because this is a function, that should only cross once. Because remember, it's a function. So a vertical line, it has to pass the vertical line test, which means it can't cross it more than once. So x equals 5 is right here. So I'm going to draw a vertical line through x equals 5. That's kind of a messy line, but it only crossed through one time, so the answer would be 1. All right, so for question O, I think it's easier because this is asking you for what values of x does y equals 3. I'm going to draw a horizontal line at y equals 3. So 3 is right here. And if I draw a horizontal line, what two x values cross through that red line? At x equals 0 and at x equals, not 3, 4. Yep, x equals 0 and x equals 4. So x equals 0, x equals 4. Now do the same thing for -2. We're going to draw a line. I like to just draw my horizontal line at -2. So I'm drawing that one in green. If I zoom in, what are the x values where it touches that green line? Well, who? So we're looking at the x values. So the first x value would be -5, and then the second one would be +8. Okay, so now let's go ahead, draw a line in your notes. Let's start 2.3. So if you're titling your notes, that's the title of 2.3. That's homework 8. Homework 8 is due on Tuesday. All right, so let's talk about even versus odd. So go ahead and copy this down. So even versus odd, if it's even, if a function is even, that simply means that it has symmetry with the y-axis. So an example of that would be a parabola that has a vertex on the y-axis. So notice that in this graph, that line should look like a mirror. Okay, so this side should match up perfectly with the right. So that's what it means to have y-axis symmetry. We're going to do a test with that in a second. In order to test, because you won't have a graph, you're just going to have an equation, we're going to replace x with -x And then if we simplify it, it should be the same. It should simplify to the exact same equation. That's how we're going to know that it is even. Whereas odd has origin symmetry, which means that you have to rotate it 180 degrees for it to match. So an example of that would be, and we're going to start graphing when we come back from Labor Day, would be that. So the point of symmetry occurs right here at the origin. So you have to imagine if you were to turn that, if I were to turn that 180 degrees, you wouldn't be able to tell that I turned it. It's going to look the same. And we're going to know that because it's going to simplify to the opposite. So the opposite of the equation. So even is going to be the same. Odd is going to be the opposite. All right, so let's go ahead and copy down these 3 questions, and we're going to do our symmetry test. Let's just do one at a time now. Copy down A, and then we will simplify it together, and then we'll do B and C separately, because I'm not sure how much space it's going to take you. So let's just look at A. All right, so what we're going to do is replace x with a negative x. So I'm going to rewrite this equation. So it'll be 2 parentheses to the power of 5 minus 3 parentheses. And now inside, I'm going to put a negative x. And going back to what we talked about, I think that was in chapter 1. If you have negative 1 to an even number, it switches to a positive. So if it has an even power, it becomes positive. But if you take a negative number to an odd, it stays negative. And that's really what you need to keep in mind when we're doing these symmetry tests. Because this first one is to the power of 5, that's going to keep this negative, which is going to cause that 2 to become negative. So that means that f of negative x is going to equal negative 2 x to the 5th plus 3x. And I want you to compare this equation to this equation. Do you see how it's exactly the opposite? So this positive 2 became negative and this negative 3 became positive. Because it's opposite, we know that it's odd. Think opposite odd, OO. So that's an odd function. So this is going to have symmetry with the origin. It's odd because it's opposite. Any questions about A?
And we always put a negative x.
Always put a negative x. So the test says you just replace x with a negative x and then you simplify it. That's how you do your test every single time. If it's the same, it's even. If it's opposite, it has odd symmetry or origin symmetry, which means it's odd. All right, so let's look at part B. So go ahead and copy down B. I guess it doesn't take a whole lot of space, but. So again, we're gonna find f of negative x. All right, so because this is because 4 is even, this is even, which is gonna make this negative x become positive again. So this is gonna stay a positive 3x to the 4th. And because that 2 is even, it's gonna make that negative x positive again. So when you compare f of negative x to f of positive x, is it the same or is it the opposite? It's the same. So because it's the same, we know this is even. It's not negative. You said, why isn't it a negative 3? Because if you take a negative to an even power, it becomes positive. Yeah. All right, last one, and then I'm just going to have you glue down something for tomorrow, and that'll be it for today. So we got f of negative x, and we have this. Put our negative x here and here. So the problem with this one is that we have an even power and an odd power. So what that's going to do is going to make that first one stay positive, but it's going to switch that second term from a negative to a positive. So this will be a neither. This has no symmetry. It has no symmetry. So this graph doesn't have symmetry with the y-axis or with the origin. All right, so I want you all to, real quick, I'm going to have you all glue down 2 examples. You want to probably give yourself some space under both. So I'm going to put them out. Go ahead, grab them both, glue them down. Give yourself a little bit of space in between.